right, now, ladies and gentlemen, we turn to the next offering. We ask you to consider what we have here. Experts have appraised it, ladies and gentlemen. It's been called something of interest for every home. Observe, please, the program, the purpose, the intention. Ladies and gentlemen, here is...
Americans at Work, Columbia's program about you and what you do for a living. In the voice you just heard, we tried to give you a suggestion about who our American at Work is tonight. He is...
the auctioneer, ladies and gentlemen. The auctioneer.
Now, perhaps you think, as many people do, that the auctioneer's work is confined to selling odd furniture or offering stocks of merchandise at foreclosure sales. But in reality, the auctioneer sells a great deal more than that. The total yearly sales at auctions run to hundreds of millions of dollars. Fur manufacturers buy 90% of their furs at auction. Carloads of tobacco, bananas, eggs, they all go at auction. Vast tracts of lands, huge buildings. Now, tonight, here with us in the studio, we have 5 auctioneers who stand foremost in their profession and who represent 5 different specialties in this ancient and honorable calling. They are Mr. John Evans, the veteran livestock auctioneer, whose specialty is horses. A stocky, jovial man who's sitting across the table from us. Mr. William Fitzgerald of the New York Auction Company, a fur auctioneer, an alert young man. I hope that answers your description, Mr. Fitzgerald, does it?
It does.
All right.
He's smiling.
Right. A word from Mr. Day. Mr. Hiram Park of the Park Burnett Galleries, the famous auctioneer of priceless objects of art, a dignified connoisseur type. Mr. Robert M. Zadra, who auctions, of all things, eggs, a young, pleasant man. And Mr. Joseph P. Day, whose name is a byword in the real estate world. Mr. Day, I'm going to call you tall, white-haired, and good-natured. Does that answer to your description?
I think so.
Now, gentlemen, as you know, everyone loves an auction. Gets a thrill out of the excitement of bidding and the chance for a bargain. And yet, when you think of it, the auction, with all its buyers and sellers, tends to create the really true economic price that our more learned peers discuss within the cloistered walls. But let's go behind the scenes and discuss a few generalities about the work of the auctioneer and the man himself. Are there certain licensing restrictions for an auctioneer? I've got to begin at the very beginning. How about that, Mr. Day? Are there?
Yes, sir.
What are they?
The most important thing is, in this state and in most of the states, I believe now, there's no by-bidding or popping, as they used to call it, allowed.
You mean bidding up the price?
Bidding up the price. That's a protection for the buyer.
And the auctioneer has to be licensed by the state, is that it?
Licensed by the state and sometimes by the county and the city.
But now, aside from the licensing, what are the personal qualifications for being a good auctioneer? You're an old hand at it, Mr. Evans. What are they?
To be a good auctioneer, it's necessary to be born to it.
It is?
You'll never acquire it if you're not born to it.
How do you think about that, Mr. Park?
Well, I think you must know the property that you're selling.
That's a very good point. I wonder, too, is a good voice a requisite?
Very much so.
How do you feel about that?
I agree with Mr. Park. Not so much since the amplifier came in.
Well, you've seen the whole time, Mr. Day. All right. How about the knowledge of human nature? Mr. Zadra, what do you think about that? Is that a necessary...
I believe it is, Mr. King. I think that you must know the people that you sell to, that you deal with.
How about you, Mr. Day?
I go along on that.
All right, I think we all go along on that. And now, before we get into discussion of individual problems here, I want to skip around the table just once and ask all of you gentlemen about the goods you sell in the matter of prices. I want to find out, to give our radio audience an idea of what's going on the auction block, how much in dollars does a good sale amount to for each one of you, and then how many individual articles are there in such a sale? How about that, Mr. Park?
Well, of course, the sales vary by reason of the outstanding objects that may be in such a sale. For instance, I've managed sales where there were 550 objects that brought as much as $2,300,000. That was for the estate of the late Judge Gary, who was president of the Steel Trust. Then there are other sales that may have that many objects that would only bring from $100,000 to $150,000.
Well, that's a very clear picture of your field. Now, how about you in the livestock world over there, Mr. Evans? You sell livestock. What is a large sale for you in dollars?
A large sale for me in dollars, well, it's hard to compute it in dollars without having a set of figures. I have sold, the most horses I ever sold in one day was 768. Now, those horses would probably average $140, $50 a piece. You people with pencils can figure it out for yourself.
All right. How about in the fur business, Mr.
I
Fitzgerald?
paid that horse auctioneer much more than that average for a couple of good carriage horses.
Well, that's the ordinary sale.
I see, Mr. Day, and thank you very much. But, Mr. Fitzgerald, how about the fur auctioneer's problem? How much in dollars does a good sale amount to?
Well, our sales always run about $1 million to $1.25 million.
And about, roughly, how many skins?
Well, if we exclude an item such as silver fox, we'll probably offer approximately 350 to 500,000 skins.
How about real estate, Mr. Day? What's a good sale for you?
The Henry Astor estate, $6 million in one day, and the Commodore Gould, $6.5 million in one afternoon, 2 hours and a half.
And that's a restricted set of buildings in each case?
Yes.
I see.
20, an average of 20, we'll say.
All right, let's step over here to Mr. Zadra, too. I'll rather move over to him. What's a good sale for you in a day's time?
Well, the eggs don't go up in millions of dollars, but $250,000 in 1 week, we believe, is a good sale for a young corporation as ours is.
And that's how many eggs?
Well, possibly 10,000 cases, 30 dozens to a case, 360 eggs to a case.
Of course, they're fresh eggs, aren't they?
Oh, you bet. Always, always.
Mr. Day, I knew I'd be out of my place. Okay. You gentlemen are all better super salesmen and better talkers, I'm sure, than any radio announcer. But now let's get to the individuals, and I hope you all will feel free to jump in here. I know you will, Mr. Day, and lend a hand when I don't make a point, will you?
You'll make points all right, young man. You're Irish.
Yes, I am. Mr. Evans, we want to ask you, first of all, about the horse auctioneer's problems. How long have you been in this business?
Well, I began when I was 16 years old, and I'm a good ways from 16 now.
I think it looks like 100.
No, I don't.
Well, I'm not quite as old as that, but I've been selling horses here in New York for 40 years.
Well, that's... I understand, too, you sell a lot of livestock. You have sold a lot of livestock.
I've
He sold me 2 horses, I'll tell you that.
I've sold more horses than any man living.
What other types of livestock have you sold?
I've sold every animal that ever came out of the jungle. I've sold elephants, camels, lions, tigers, hyenas, boa constrictors, and all of those things. The way I come to sell them, I sold out 2 circuses.
I see.
Sold out the Cole Brothers show in Corey, Pennsylvania one time, and the Johnny Robbins show in Indianapolis.
Well, now, you said going back to when you were 16 when you started. How did you get into this auctioneering work?
Well, I was born to it. I come from a family of auctioneers. On my mother's side, they were practically all auctioneers.
He had a good mother, then.
Yeah.
I did. I looked very much like her as she looked when she was a young woman.
Well, did you just happen to slide into the work? Somebody come along someday and say you're an
Somebody
auctioneer?
came along one day and wanted to build a sale and put my name on it.
Yes.
And the first thing I ever sold in my life was a grain cradle. I doubt whether you people know what it is.
No, I don't. That's beyond me.
That's the first article I ever sold in my life.
What was it?
The grain cradle. Do you know what it is?
No.
Do you know what it is?
No.
Well, you know.
No.
If you sell
grain cradle, did you
sell
say?
eggs and don't know what a grain cradle is?
I'm sorry.
Well, a grain
I thought he
cradle...
was 100 years old.
No, a grain cradle is what they use in the foreign countries to cut grain. The foreigners use them still to cut grain.
A grain cradle.
Yeah, and then after that, you got into the livestock. And what were the horse auctions like in the old days? Tell us about that.
Well, the horse auctions in the old days were so fast, I used to average about 75 horses an hour all the time, beginning at 10 o'clock and run on till we finished the sale. Those sales would average around 350 to 400 horses each sale.
How many horses do you figure you've sold in all?
I've sold over 1.5 million.
How many horse auctions are there today?
Oh, do you mean throughout the country or here in New York?
Here in New York.
Well, there are only 2 that are conducted now.
It's really come down. The horses are disappearing.
The horses are disappearing, although
Everyone
there are
knows
more
that.
horses in New York today than you think there are. There's still about 8,000 horses in greater New York.
There really are. I didn't know that.
There's 16 million in the country.
What's the knack or trick in being a successful auctioneer of horses? I shouldn't say trick, but what's the
Well,
knack
it's
to that?
necessary, like it is in every other line of auction, it's necessary to know what you're selling and who's going to buy. You've got to form a value of the animal as you see, and if you're a good auctioneer, you'll soon know that. As he comes to you, you've got to know pretty nearly what he'll bring and who'll buy him.
It's a sixth sense, isn't it?
It's a sixth sense, that's what it is.
Well, aside from that, you have to have a gift of gab, don't you?
Well, it's necessary to talk fast to sell as fast as I do.
I understand you sell about 75 horses an hour, you can.
That's what I used to average.
Well,
I've often sold over 100 in an hour.
Well, Mr. Evans, you are, in my opinion, well gifted along those lines, the gift of gab and, of course, understanding your business. But have you ever thought of being a radio announcer?
Well, I might have thought of it, but since I see it tonight, I don't think I will.
You've got me there, I bow. No, but before I do bow out, I do want to ask you this. Have you ever sold any horses for foreign countries, huge lots of them?
At the end of the war, I sold all of the horses that were in this country belonging to the British, the French, and the Italian government.
What's that song? Horses, horses, horses.
To what degree do you think the horse is being replaced by the auto?
Well, I have said several times that years ago a horse used to be afraid of an automobile, but after a while it'll be so if a horse meets another horse, you'll shy away from him. They'll be so scared.
Thank you, Mr.
You don't
Evans.
know what he is.
Thank you very much. I think you've given us a very clear picture. Now I want to ask Mr. Fitzgerald, William Fitzgerald, who handles the fur auctions. In the fur auctions...
How does an Irishman come to sell furs? That's what I want to know.
How does an Irishman come to sell furs?
I wouldn't dare make it public.
In the fur auctions, where do the furs come from? Where do you get them?
Well, we get them from all parts of the world.
And they're on consignment?
They're sent to us on a consignment basis.
And then how are the furs handled? Are they tagged or put in lots?
They're graded and put into various lots and given a lot number. And that's cataloged.
When the auction gets underway, you're down here in your fur auction, how is the bidding carried on? How do they make the bids?
Well, it's very secretive. One buyer doesn't wish another buyer to know when he's bidding, so he either blinks his eye or wiggles his ear or lifts his finger.
And you have to know all those individual signals for each buyer.
Oh, yes.
I think that's pretty general in our discussions this evening about those secretive bids among the auctioneers that are here, at least from what we said. How often are your fur auctions held?
Well, we hold 4 general sales a year and 5 special silver fox and mink sales during the year.
And that applies to the whole trade?
That applies to the whole trade.
And supplies my lady with everything that she wears in the fur line?
My lady controls the fur line.
She does?
Absolutely.
Well, what is she choosing this year as being very popular?
Well, she still thinks silver fox is very good.
How about
but
red
she's
fox?
Also kind of taken a liking to red fox and mink and beaver. And she's also very fond of muskrats, as she always has been.
I see. How many lots are sold on the average in an hour in your fur auction?
Well, our auctions depend a lot on speed, so we try to sell from 180 to 200 lots an hour.
About yourself now a minute. On what basis is the fur auctioneer paid? Do you have a salary or...
we work on... The fur auctioneer works on a salary.
On a salary. Roughly, what is that salary, roughly?
Well, the fur auctioneer earns from $5,000 to $10,000 a year.
Well, that's a very good salary. Have you ever sold any furs
I think the real estate business have to take hold of that fur business and show them how to make money.
Why, do you make more in real estate?
I will.
I'll get around to you in a minute. Have you ever sold any furs to celebrities?
Well, several years ago, our firm sold silver foxes that were made into capes for now Duchess of Windsor.
Really? That's very interesting. That goes back into our public history, I guess.
Well, not too far back.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fitzgerald, and for your story of the fur auction and the fur auctioneer. I want to jump over now to the egg auction. I'm jumping over there enough. I've broken about a dozen crates of the egg. Mr. Robert M. Zadra, the auctioneer for the New York Egg Auction Company. Will you tell us, Mr. Zadra, when are the egg auctions held?
Well, we hold our egg auction daily, Monday to Friday inclusive, and we...
In the morning?
At 12:15 every day.
I see. And how long does it run each session?
Well, depending on the volume offered, the average is about an hour and 15 minutes.
Well, just about how many eggs are sold there every day?
Well, on an average of about 1,800 to 2,000 cases daily.
And 30 dozens?
That's 30 dozens to the case, 360 eggs to the case. All fresh eggs, Mr. Day.
It's about 700,000 eggs.
That's right.
That'd make quite an omelet, Mr. Zadra.
Sure would.
Now, how do you get your bids in the egg auction?
Well, the bids, a lot of them are trick signals. A lot of the customer don't care to let the other one know when they do the bidding. Very often we apply a number to the customer. And instead of mentioning the customer's name at the time of the purchase, why, we mention his number.
And only you know the number.
And only the firm or the clerk that takes the number down knows who the customer is that does the buying, due to the fact that his bidding is secretive.
Well, we've heard all about these trick signals of touching the necktie or winking the eye? Or is there anything special down there that you have in
Well,
your...
we have one particular into the candling booth, which is covered by curtains, and every time he cares to make a bid, he just sticks his head out of a candling booth, and that's the sign that he's bidding.
Well, that's quite a picture. Now, I want to ask you, too, you mentioned something about telephone bids, and we were speaking before the program. What's that all about? What are telephone bids?
We have out-of-town customers. They cannot attend the auction, so naturally, we have several salesmen on a stand which telephones, and these customers will call in, ask the salesman the way the biddings is going in a certain lot or brand which they might be interested, and they authorize the salesman to represent them in the bidding. And very often they buy large quantities of eggs in that manner.
They keep in constant touch with the auction, then, I take it?
Yes, they do. They receive a catalog of our offerings every morning in their mail.
Well, how is the egg market at present time? How's that going?
Well, at the very present time, the market is very dull.
It is?
Yes.
I don't quite understand that. I can't see how people would stop eating eggs one day and eat them again the next day.
Well, the price factor is predominant as far as the public. I mean, when eggs go up to 51, 53 cents a dozen for the best eggs, why people will stop eating eggs and probably go to pork and beans or something like that.
And then the price comes back down again.
That's right.
They're not buying.
That's right.
I suppose that the buyers there at your egg auction represent the tastes of your community around, don't they, in their locality?
Yes.
And you get an idea of what the people like. Whether
That's
they like
right.
brown eggs or white eggs?
Well, there's not much difference in the quality of brown eggs or white eggs. Here in New York, of course, is largely a white egg market. In other words, the white egg would bring more money here in New York than the brown egg, whereas in Boston, it's just the opposite. They prefer to have the brown eggs up there rather than the whites. But there's no difference in quality.
Same way in Philadelphia. Philadelphia's a brown egg.
That's so.
And now, about your income. I don't want to get personal here, but roughly, what does the egg auctioneer average in a year?
You mean as far as salary?
Yes.
Well,
When you work on commissions?
No, we work in straight salary.
You do work
We work in straight salary, and of course, I don't really like to say what I'm being paid because my employer might be listening and he may be thinking that I'm not getting enough.
Well, I'm going to ask you a very personal question here, Mr. Zadra. You sell all these eggs, but do you eat them?
I'm very, very sorry to say that the only time I eat eggs is on a Sunday morning, and that's due to the fact that I've got to get up too early to get to work in time, and I have to commute. Naturally, I haven't got the time to eat the eggs, but I do have them every Sunday, and I do love them.
How many do you eat on a Sunday morning?
Oh, about 4.
About 4? Well, that's very good. I want to thank you very much, Mr. Zadra, and I hope we didn't go too far behind the scenes into your private life, but I think you did present a very clear picture.
Thank you, Mr. King.
Of the egg situation and the egg auctions. And now we come to Mr. Hiram H. Park, the president of the Park Burnett Galleries, the auctioneers of artistic and literary property. Mr. Park, how long have you been in the business?
42 years.
42 years. You've probably seen a great deal of changes. How did you happen to get into auctioneering of artistic properties?
Well, I first went into the auction business as a clerk. And shortly after, probably 6 or 8 months after going in as a clerk, I was called upon by my employer to relieve him on the stand. He was the auctioneer at that time, and his throat He'd had some affection of his throat at the time, and he asked me to relieve him. And from then on, I've been an auctioneer.
I see. The main personal...
I'll say is a swell one.
Well, Mr. Day, I know you're a Mutual Admiration Society here, Mr. Park, as you said yourself a little while ago. And I know you're going to help me with the interview here. You just stay right with us, will you? Because I'm going to miss a few questions, I'm sure. The main...
No, you'll ask one, too.
The main personal requisite in your work is, of course, knowledge of the art goods that you handle, isn't it?
That is true.
That's the first and foremost thing, wouldn't it?
First and most important thing.
And what's next? What's the next requisite?
Well, getting the proper goods to sell and getting the buyers for those goods, knowing how to reach the buyers.
A knowledge of personal psychology, we might say.
That's one of the main essentials of the auction business, the art business especially, art and literary.
Speaking of your business, what famous and outstanding art objects have you sold?
Well, I've sold probably some of the most famous sales of art objects that have been sold in this country. In fact, The most outstanding sale was the Great Gary sale back in 1928, which realized over $2,290,000.
What was in that sale? What articles?
Well, the highest price picture in that particular sale was the Gainsborough's masterpiece of the Harvest Wagon, which realized at that sale $360,000.
What else was sold there of importance and note?
Also in the same sale, there was a small bust, a marble bust by the great sculptor Houdin.
How much did that bring?
That brought $245,000. That was a bust of his daughter Sabine.
I see. How about your sales of old masters, for instance? Have you ever had any outstanding ones there that you can recall?
Yes, we had the great Stillman sale in 1927, in which 37 paintings at that time brought $716,000. And the main picture there and the highest price ever realized for a Rembrandt painting was at that particular sale. And it was the total for that. The total for the sale was $716,000, of which this one picture brought $270,000.
A Rembrandt. What picture was that?
That was a Rembrandt's. That was a painting by Rembrandt of his son Titus.
Mm-hmm.
And it realized, I say, $270,000 and sold to the great house of Devine Brothers, Lord Devine, who passed away recently.
I wonder whether you've ever encountered the case of a very small audience, royalty, poor sale or anything of that sort.
Yes, I've had large, very large audiences and very small ones.
Inclemencies of weather, I imagine, affect that.
I recall back in about 1920, on Washington's birthday in 1920, we had a blizzard. And we were selling at that time a collection of Washingtonian material. In other words, objects that were mostly owned by Washington or
his descendants.
Mm-hmm. In fact, the sale was being conducted for one of the Washington family, one of his descendants. And we had this very stormy and snowy day, and we didn't expect to have much of an audience, and Mr. Washington, Lanier Washington, wanted the sale postponed. We told him we thought that we'd have a crowd that day, but there wasn't much of a crowd, but the sale turned out to be very successful.
How was that?
And there were two very good and very liberal bidders at that particular sale. One of them was George D. Smith, one of the great book collectors and book salesmen of his day, and the other was the Mr. William Randolph Hearst, and the two of them made that sale for us.
I see.
And it proved to be very successful.
Well, what was the largest audience? Skipping over to the other side, the largest audience
that was in the Gary sale, which I had the pleasure of conducting at the Hotel Plaza on April 28, 1928. And the ballroom at that time, the seating capacity of the ballroom at that time was 1,800. But there were more than 3,600 people in the ballroom had passed through the doors.
I imagine you could hardly get up in the stand.
It was the sale was scheduled for 8:30, and it was 9 o'clock before I could get to the rostrum.
And it was a big
started
success.
the sale, and the sale was a big success. That evening's sale run about $1,400,000.
Well, now I know we're speaking in big terms, and we're speaking of people who buy. Big money terms, I mean, of course. People who buy art objects. Have you ever encountered cases of unlimited counterbidding on the same article?
Yes, I once had an instance in Philadelphia where I was selling a sale for one of the very wealthy families there in Philadelphia. And one of the most prominent citizens at that time was executor for this particular estate. And just on the eve of the sale, he was called to Brussels and had left me an unlimited bid on a pair of pictures. And the sale came off within a few days, and I was selling these particular pictures, and I noticed that they had run up to considerably more than we thought they were valued at. And the only two that seemed to be bidding at that time was myself as auctioneer and one of my assistants. I called to him and asked him what was... I couldn't ask him his bid exactly, but I asked whether he had some sort of an unlimited bid left with him, and he said that he had. I, knowing that I had this unlimited bid from the executor or his representative, I merely stopped the sale of those 2 pictures, withdrew them from the sale until I could get the 2 bidders together.
And settle it that way.
And it was settled in that way, and they were divided. One taking the female portrait and the other the male portrait.
I see. Well, thank you very much. You've given us a wonderful story there.
You split a family, didn't you?
Indeed.
Auctioneer of artistic properties, Mr. Parks. Now I'm going to turn around here to Mr. Joseph P. Day, the auctioneer of real estate, who's all set and ready to go. Mr. Day, you've been very quiet. But your fame as an auctioneer runs right along with our other guests this evening, and you're certainly one of the super salesmen of the day. You've never by any chance sold the Brooklyn Bridge, have you?
No, but I sold the 6th Avenue elevators.
Oh, no, wait a minute. Tell us about it. You sold the 6th Avenue elevated?
Yes.
Tell me all about that.
Oh, that's a short story. Sold it. After they bought it, they found out that there was cement in the pillars, and so they lost money on it. But that wasn't the fault of the auctioneer or anybody else. Nobody knew about it.
How does selling real estate differ from the methods of these other gentlemen?
Well, the principles, I think, are the same in all. It's sort of action. It's first attention, and then desire, and then finally it leads up to getting
the actual sale.
Yes, getting the sale of stuff.
Well, now, what real estate have you auctioned at the highest price? What big package have you sold? What's your biggest package?
The Henry Astor estate.
How much did that go for?
$6 million.
Oh, my goodness.
$6 million.
$6 million. How much?
The Commodore Gould estate went for $6.5 million, and the James Gordon Bennett estate, the owner of the late New York Herald before it was taken into the Herald Tribune.
Yes.
That was lots up in the Bronx, and that sold up in Washington Heights, and that sold for $1,700,000 in an afternoon, and the biggest buyer was this Dr. Paterno.
You've had many millions of dollars come across the auction block. How much real estate have you sold at auction, do you imagine, in the course of your work as an auctioneer?
About $1 billion worth.
About $1 billion? Mm-hmm. Beginning with a B.
Billion. Not million, billion.
Why is real estate often auctioned off instead of being sold off at a set price? I don't understand that.
Why, it's the reason of that is estates where there's heirs and children and scattered heirs, and it's sold then sold by the highest bidder.
To settle financially, the estate.
And there's a law in many states that there's no buy bidding. No. In New York State, there's no buy bidding permitted.
What do you mean by buy bidding?
Why, there's nobody can go in and
bid it up?
Boost up the sale. No, it
must be all.
It must be bona fide.
I suppose
that's the protection.
I suppose psychology plays a big part in your auctioneering, doesn't it?
It does.
Do you have any reminiscences on that subject of psychology?
Now we're talking about this arms restriction.
Yes.
Sal Bloom.
Yes.
I sold him a piece of property one afternoon for $340,000.
You really did? Tell us about that.
Well, he didn't. He thought his bid was only $335, and I said, Sal, you've got to take it. It's $340. That's what I took your bid at. And he came back he went out a little bit angry, and he came back 2 hours after, and he said, Joe, is that still open for me? I said, it certainly is. And I expect you to take it, or at least I want to take it. I've just sold the contract for $40,000 profit. I gave him the property at his bid, at the bid I said.
What's your hobby, Mr. Day?
Well, one of my hobbies is buying Gertie's prayer rugs at auction from that young man Park over there, or the Park Mr.
Park, is he a good judge of values?
Well, I think his judgment's pretty good on those things.
I see. Well, thank you very much. I want to thank you, Mr. Day, and you, Mr. Park. And as they say at an auction sale, all done. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been listening to...
No, not all done. Sold.
Sold. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been listening to Americans at Work, the program about you and what you do for a living, presented each week by the CBS Department of Education. Previous Americans at Work scripts, complete with directional cues, have been printed in attractive pamphlet form. Single copies may be obtained for 10 cents each, or for $1, you may secure a set of 13 different scripts. Just send your order to Americans at Work, CBS, New York. Tonight's program was directed by Brewster Morgan. The Workers' Education Bureau of America collaborates on research for the entire series. Next Thursday evening, Americans at Work will be heard from 10:30 to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. John Reed King speaking. This is the Columbia Broadcasting System.
10 p.m. BULOVA, Bolivar Watch Time.